Welcome back to the new SEC podcast. I'm Hunter Ziesman here with Randall Liddett Jr. As always, we are talking Arkansas playing Texas. Arkansas looking for their first SEC win. Texas, after a heartbreaking loss last week at Georgia, finds himself at number 17 in the CFP race. You know, I see a lot of Texas fans looking ahead. Do we make it in as a 3-loss team? One step at a time. This is a good Arkansas team. The offense is really, really solid. We've seen them every week do, for the most part, what they need to do aside from some sloppy play. But, you know, right now, Texas 8.5-point favorites in this one. Randall, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's on the playoff race front for Texas, one step at a time. I admire their thought process around the playoffs. It's a resume competition, right? Finish in the top 7 resumes. Then there's the automatic bids, the five spots. I could see why they feel that way, but when I think about this game, I just don't know what Texas is going to show up. And if someone knows which Texas is going to show up, like, you need to go buy a lotto ticket. Georgia is super dominant. I get it. 35-10 loss. They're the masterclass of the SEC, but you beat Vanderbilt pretty well. But then you struggle against Mississippi State and Kentucky. I know that's in the past. I thought Texas was turning the corner. I expected a Georgia win. I didn't expect a loss that badly. And so it's making me kind of reset my expectations of what I expect for this Texas team.
Yeah. In majority of the game, while out of reach, the score didn't look super bad until, later in the game, but it still always had that vibe of, Georgia being that 1-2 step ahead, right? I will say, to benefit, I was somewhat impressed with Arch in the game, aside from, the score. I think he played fairly well, all things considered. 5 drops on the day from his receivers. Georgia, uncharacteristic pressure from them. They were getting additional pressure. That's something that Texas couldn't alleviate. I mean, they didn't get any running game going. So, you had Arch throwing over 40 times on the day. You're asking a lot of him. I think he's stepping really, really well into a game manager role, a guy who can make great plays, avoid a lot of turnovers. We saw the one in the Georgia game. But I think if that guy can show up as you continue on, this is a team that can challenge Arkansas, can challenge Texas A&M offensively, I'm saying. So if that version of the team around him shows up, I do think that he fits into that very well. I think he's not there yet to be a mastermind. I'm the game saver if the running doesn't get going or my receivers don't play well.
And it kind of goes to the question that Steve Sarkisian was asked around, do you feel like this season was a disappointment? And Arkansas fans, if you're listening to this, we'll definitely get to your points for your team. But, it gets to the point to what Sarkisian was asked, do you think this season was a disappointment? It goes back to expectations. The expectations on Texas were number 1. The expectations on Arch were he's going to be the number 1 quarterback in this class, and we hadn't seen any of it. And when you take a step back and you let Arch be who he is, a first-year starter, a redshirt sophomore, you can actually appreciate what he brought to the Georgia football game. You can sit back and say, hey, that's a really good Georgia football team. The running game wasn't there for Texas, like you mentioned, but he wasn't necessarily the problem all the way why they lost, right? They were only down by 11, then an onside kick happened. You see Arch getting better. I see a quarterback that you let him play 3 years of college football. That's an NFL quarterback, most likely. I'm not saying he's first round. I'm not saying he is Arch or Eli. Arkansas is a formidable opponent. They've had several games where they've lost pretty closely. Didn't see Taylon Green's best performance. But the Texas team, to your point, they can really challenge an offense. I expect them to challenge this offense pretty well. And then offensively, this should be a game where, if we've seen what Arkansas has allowed throughout the season, this is probably their best defensive performance against LSU.
Yeah.
Arch should be able to be a good game manager, like you said, and use his weapons to be able to score in this game relatively easily.
Yeah, it should be an opportunity to not have a running performance like last week from Contravian Wisner, from the rushing attack, from the receiver standpoint. There's a lot more room to work against an Arkansas team because they've been in just shootouts. Like, the defense has not really done their part. The Arkansas offense, let's talk a little about them, because what they've been able to do is get a ton of yards, score a bunch of points in this kind of fast and furious, a little bit sloppy football. But, it's crazy what they're doing. I looked this up. They're 12th in the nation right now in yards per game, 460 yards per game. 9 of the teams ahead of them are ranked. That means that there's 16 teams behind them who aren't putting up the offensive numbers that Arkansas is, and they're 2-8. So something's not working for this team, and it's a couple things. It's defense, but also turnovers. Turnovers have been a problem, and without that, they probably would have won the LSU game.
Yeah, and the turnovers kind of come from the guy who truly is their guy, and Taylor Green, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. When you're on the field a ton, turnovers are obviously a likelihood that could happen. He's their superhero. He's also their kryptonite sometimes, and that's where we saw it last game. 2 interceptions against LSU wasn't enough when you give the other team the ball back a couple times for them to pull out a win, and we've seen it time and time again this season in conference play.
Yeah, and if they clean that up, I mean, it's solid. We saw the Mike Washington fumbles, and like you mentioned, the Taylor Green interceptions. They're 6.9 yards per play, 7th most in the nation. 2 turnovers a game puts them 128th in the nation. So it's a tale of 2 different sides where it's really, really stellar offensive football that's not polished. And I think that's the best way to describe it. Now, looking at how they perform against the Texas defense, one of the things leaving the Georgia game that was almost bigger than the loss is a big part of it. Anthony Hill Jr. fracturing part of his hand. That's a big one. We'll see if he can go in this game or if they try to push that timeline to the Texas A&M one. I thought Taft coming back was going to be a big factor. I thought McDonald coming, off of injury for the Georgia game was going to be a big factor. It really wasn't. So I think Arkansas can test them and continue their offense against this Texas defense. They just won't be able to run as much, for sure.
Yeah, I think they definitely can as well. And I think, most teams to this point, at least I'm thinking about the last couple games of Texas plays, and I keep referencing who they previously played. Like we saw Vanderbilt be able to score. We saw Mississippi State be able to score. The Kentucky game was kind of a defensive battle in some ways. I think that this Texas defense, like you said, can be scored on. If this is the game that Arkansas can put together a full 4 quarters and keep the possession in their hands, that makes this game a lot different for them. When we think about this Arkansas defense, only gave up 22 points. LSU's offense has not been super impressive this season. I ride for my boy MVB, but he played okay. So I think in this game, Arkansas's defense may have a chance to slow them down. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the keys there are you need to shut down the running attack for Texas. That's been the easiest way to slow down the offense, is try to make them one-dimensional. It's a hard thing to do for a quarterback. We've seen even, really, really highly touted good quarterbacks like Ty Simpson. If the running isn't there, it's hard to be a quarterback that can only do that, one job, pass the ball if your running's not working. And, for Arch Manning, it's been the same story. So if you're Arkansas defense, that would be the first test. See if you can stop the run. But again, the Arkansas defense just is not something that I'm going to be relying any bit on. I'd be looking more at a shootout style game where Arkansas's offense continues to propel and try to score, every drive, leaving few unscored drives on the field. That's kind of been how they've stayed in games close, but haven't been able to pull it out.
Yeah, they're definitely going to have to be able to score, and I think one of the keys is going to be keeping Taylor Green upright. Right, right now Arkansas is 4th in the SEC in overall sacks, given up 24 sacks on the season. If they can keep Taylor Green upright, it'll keep the game closer, possess the football. A lot of teams in the SEC, like you mentioned, have had one-dimensional offenses. We've seen it from Alabama, mostly passing. We're seeing it from Texas. I don't think it's going to matter that much in this game. But when you're playing a weaker defense like Arkansas, you're making their job easier, having to just stop one side of the ball. But Arkansas hasn't really proven to be the best run defense. I think they're bottom of the SEC, like kind of between 13th and 16th in the SEC in rushing yards allowed. So similar to Mississippi State, they're gashable.
Yeah. And right now, from a morale standpoint, Texas has a lot to play for, because even though, they're outside looking in, should they finish as a 3-loss team, that means that they have a win here, but they have an impressive win versus A&M. Should that happen next week, a lot to play for. We've seen Bobby Petrino saying now it's hard to keep this team motivated. He's having a hard time doing that. That's not what you want to hear from, a
rivalry game.
Yeah.
Players getting paid. What do you mean it's hard to keep them motivated? You got a whole check.
Yeah. His words, not mine. I mean, it's how it's going right now. And, because they're in this process of interim. Where do you go? You hear they might want to go with a defensive-minded coach, which is probably what's best for the program. Maybe you look at, I don't know who they could get right now. A lot of these coaches are starting to find their homes, or they're starting to hear the rumors about where. But that's where Arkansas's mind is at. Texas' mind's on playoffs. So in this game, I think that's one of the few things that plays into factor here. It being in Austin, it being a Texas team that has a lot to play for. I do see it being close. I think that Arkansas's offense can continue to score. I think it's a little bit lower scoring than a lot of their bouts have been so far, though. But I ultimately do have Texas here, 31-28.
Yeah, it's 52.5 over under with a 57.5 over under. I know it's an 8.5 spread. I like Texas in this game. I'm going to say 28-20. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a Mike Washington fumble. He only had about 65 rushing yards last week. I don't see that being higher this week. Texas has a top 3 rushing defense. And Arkansas, I just don't see this being the one SEC game they do win. Tough season. You start off the season 3-1 or 4-0. We're talking about how great they look, and here's where we are. Pivoting to playoff talk for everyone still watching the video. Thoughts on Texas's playoff chances now that we have the new CFP rankings?
A lot of things have to happen. The thing, like I mentioned earlier, should they make it, as a 3-loss team, it would mean that they did beat a number 3 Texas A&M. Like, that would be the resume booster builder. Also, you beat an Oklahoma team who's rising up the ranks following the Alabama win. So you have quality wins on your resume, but you have teams ahead of you, like, SEC fans, sorry, but like, you got BYU, a 1-loss team. Like, that's sitting on the outside looking in. You got Miami, a 2-loss team who also has an impressive win. They beat Notre Dame.
Utah.
So, you got Utah, 2 losses, who has beat a ranked opponent now. So that's where I'm kind of like, I don't see why they would get in over some of these teams. I think it takes tremendous shakeup, but 17 is where you're at. Just continue fighting and hope for what's some craziness ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some bowl projections with them potentially playing Houston in the Texas Bowl, my alma mater. So wouldn't hate to see that. But Texas fans, you keep winning, you potentially beat Texas A&M. Then you worry about where the cards fall after that, right? Yeah. You had a lot of tests this season, and so we'll see. But we gave you our predictions. We let you know who we think is going to win this game. We want to know who y'all think is going to win this game. I'm Randall Dett Jr. We got Hunter Ziesman. It's a new SEC podcast. Until next time.